The rhythmic clacking of train wheels against metal tracks was the only sound keeping me company as I stared at my reflection in the window. Dark circles shadowed my eyes, evidence of sleepless nights and silent tears. My fingers trembled as they traced the fading bruise on my wrist, a parting gift from Richard. 3 years of marriage had slowly stripped away everything I once was, leaving behind this hollow shell of a woman, running away in the dead of night with nothing but a hastily packed duffel bag and the desperate hope for a new beginning. Rain pelted against the glass, distorting the darkness outside into a blur of shadows and distant lights. The gentle sway of the train car should have been comforting, but my heart refused to slow its frantic rhythm. Every few minutes I found myself glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see Richard's towering figure looming in the aisle, his face contorted with that familiar rage that always preceded the worst nights. I pulled my oversized sweater tighter around my body, trying to disappear into the worn fabric. The carriage was nearly empty at this late hour, just a few scattered passengers dozing or staring vacantly at their phones. Nobody noticed the woman with the haunted eyes clutching her bag like a lifeline. Nobody cared about one more invisible person fleeing from their demons. The train lurched suddenly, and my bag slipped from my lap, spilling its contents across the floor. I scrambled to collect my meager belongings, cheeks burning with embarrassment. As I reached for my worn paperback novel, my fingers brushed against expensive Italian leather shoes that hadn't been there a moment ago. "Allow me." The voice was deep, like velvet dragged across gravel. I froze, unable to look up, my body instinctively bracing for humiliation or worse. But the man simply crouched down, gathering my scattered possessions with unexpected care. When he handed me the book, I finally forced myself to meet his gaze. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. He wasn't just handsome, he was beautiful in the way dangerous things often are. Sharp cheekbones framed eyes so dark they appeared almost black in the dim lighting of the train car. His suit probably cost more than 6 months of my rent, each line tailored to perfection against his broad shoulders. But it was the stillness about him that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. The practiced, predatory calm of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Thank you," I whispered, quickly averting my eyes and clutching my bag against my chest. Instead of continuing down the aisle, he settled into the seat across from mine. The empty carriage stretched in both directions, yet he chose to sit directly opposite me. A subtle scent of expensive cologne mingled with something darker drifted across the space between us. Sandalwood, amber, and the faintest hint of cigarette smoke. "You're shaking," he observed, his voice betraying no emotion. I hadn't realized my trembling was visible. "I'm fine, just cold." His eyes flickered to my wrist where the sleeve had ridden up, revealing the yellowing bruise. Something dangerous flashed across his features, before his expression smoothed back into unreadable stillness. Without a word, he removed his suit jacket and held it out to me. "I don't need..." "Take it." It wasn't a request. Despite everything in me screaming to maintain distance from strange men, I found myself accepting the jacket. It was still warm from his body, impossibly soft against my skin. I draped it over my shoulders, immediately enveloped in warmth and that intoxicating scent. "Where are you headed?" he asked, settling back into his seat with a casual elegance that seemed entirely out of place in the grimy train car. "Away," I answered vaguely, unwilling to share details with a stranger, no matter how expensively dressed. A slight curve touched his lips, not quite a smile, but something adjacent to amusement. A good direction to be heading. Before I could respond, the train jolted violently. My body lurched forward, and suddenly his hands were on my arms, steadying me with surprising strength. For a heartbeat, we were close enough that I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could feel the controlled power in his grip. Then he carefully set me back into my seat, his touch lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you," I murmured again, unsettled by the way my skin tingled where his fingers had been. His phone vibrated, and he glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. He answered with a single curt word in what sounded like Italian, listening intently before responding with a series of short, clipped sentences. Though I couldn't understand the language, the authority in his tone needed no translation. When he ended the call, the atmosphere had changed. He studied me with an intensity that made me want to disappear into the upholstery. "You're running from something," he stated. "Not a question. Aren't we all?" I countered weakly. "Not me," he replied with absolute certainty. "I never run." The train began to slow as we approached the next station. I gathered my belongings, preparing to change trains as planned. My escape route was mapped out meticulously, a zigzagging path designed to lose anyone who might follow. Richard had connections in the police department. I couldn't risk staying on one route too long. "This is my stop," I said, standing on unsteady legs. He rose as well, towering over me. What a coincidence. Mine too. Alarm bells rang in my head. This station was barely a whisper of a place. A rural platform where only local trains stopped. What business would a man in a suit worth thousands have here? As I stepped onto the platform, the cold night air slapped against my face. The station was deserted except for a single attendant closing up the ticket booth. Rain continued to fall in heavy sheets, creating a curtain of water that obscured the distant lights. I pulled the stranger's jacket tighter around my shoulders, suddenly realizing I was still wearing it. "Your jacket," I began, starting to shrug it off. "Keep it," he said dismissively. "You need it more than I do." I should have insisted, should have returned it and walked away. Instead, I clutched it closer, grateful for its warmth against the biting cold. "Thank you, Mr. Salvatore," he offered, dark eyes studying my reaction. Luca Salvatore. The name meant nothing to me then. If it had, perhaps I would have run in the opposite direction, regardless of the storm. "Elena," I responded, giving him the name I'd chosen for my new identity. Not a complete lie. It was my middle name, one Richard never used. Luca's lips curved into that same not-quite smile. "Elena," he repeated, as though testing the taste of my name. "It suits you." A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, seemingly materializing from nowhere. The driver, a broad-shouldered man with an expressionless face, stepped out and opened the rear door without a word. Luca turned to me, raindrops glistening in his dark hair. "Where are you staying tonight, Elena?" The question sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the rain. "I have arrangements," I lied. In truth, I planned to take the next train to another small town, finding a motel that accepted cash and didn't ask questions. Luca's eyes narrowed slightly, and I had the unsettling feeling he could see right through my deception. "The next train isn't until morning. This area has nothing open at this hour." As if to emphasize his point, the station attendant locked the ticket booth and hurried to his car, leaving us alone on the platform. The realization of my miscalculation hit me with sickening clarity. In my haste to choose obscure connections, I'd stranded myself in the middle of nowhere in the dead of night. "I can give you a ride," Luca offered, gesturing to the waiting car. "No, thank you. I'll be fine." The words sounded hollow even to my own ears. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face, all sharp angles and intense focus. "You're stranded in a storm with nowhere to go. Your wrist suggests you're running from someone who hurt you. Your eyes haven't stopped scanning for threats since you got on that train. You're not fine, Elena." I took a step back, suddenly afraid. Not of him, exactly, but of his perception, the way he'd so easily peeled back my carefully constructed facade. "I don't get into cars with strange men," I said, trying to inject firmness into my trembling voice. "Smart policy," he conceded, then added, "but sometimes the devil you don't know is safer than the one you do." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands, blood turning to ice as Richard's name flashed on the screen. How? I'd been so careful. The burner phone was brand new, purchased with cash. The only person who had the number was my sister, and she would never... Luca plucked the phone from my grip before I could react. He glanced at the screen, then looked at me with newfound intensity. Without breaking eye contact, he answered the call and put it on speaker. "Who the fuck is this?" Richard's voice slurred through the speaker, thick with alcohol and rage. "Put my wife on the phone, now." My legs nearly buckled beneath me. Somehow, he'd found me. The nightmare wasn't over. It had barely begun. Luca's expression remained perfectly composed, but something deadly entered his eyes. "Your wife is unavailable," he replied, his voice deceptively soft. "Listen, you piece of shit," Richard snarled. "That's my property you're talking to. I know exactly where she is, and I'm coming to get what belongs to me. You'd better be gone when I get there, or I'll make you regret the day you were born." A cold smile curved Luca's lips. "Is that so? You have no idea who you're fucking with," Richard continued, his words slurring together. "I'm a cop. I have friends. We take care of people who interfere with our business." "How fascinating," Luca replied, his tone conversational despite the lethal glint in his eyes. "I look forward to our meeting." He ended the call and turned to me. My heart hammered against my ribs as panic clawed up my throat. "He found me," I whispered, terror making it difficult to breathe. "He's coming." "Yes," Luca agreed calmly, pocketing my phone. "But I'll be here when he arrives." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Tell me, Elena, do you want to be free of him?" The question hung between us, heavy with implications I couldn't fully grasp. Lightning split the sky again, casting harsh shadows across his face. In that moment, with rain soaking through my clothes and fear freezing my veins, I made a choice that would alter the course of my life forever. "Yes," I breathed, the word barely audible above the storm. Luca's eyes darkened with something that looked remarkably like satisfaction. "Then come with me." Everything I'd ever been taught screamed at me to run, to trust no one, especially not a stranger with dangerous eyes and too much power in his voice. But Richard was coming, and my carefully planned escape was unraveling before my eyes. The devil I knew was hunting me, and my options had dwindled to a single terrifying choice. I stepped toward the waiting car. Luca's hand settled at the small of my back as he guided me to the vehicle, his touch light, but unmistakably possessive. As the driver held the door open, Luca leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. "You're safe now, Elena," he murmured. "No one will hurt you again." It sounded like a promise. It felt like a claim. I slid into the back seat, the leather cool and buttery beneath my fingertips. Luca settled beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. As the car pulled away from the station, I caught sight of my reflection in the window, a pale face framed by damp hair, wearing an expression somewhere between terror and desperate hope. "What have I done?" I thought, as the stranger beside me made another call, his voice low and commanding. "We have a situation," he said in English, his eyes never leaving my face. "Someone thinks he can take what's mine." The car glided through the rain-slicked streets, windshield wipers creating a hypnotic rhythm that matched my racing heartbeat. I sat rigidly on the edge of the leather seat, acutely aware of Luca's presence beside me. He hadn't spoken since that cryptic phone call. His attention focused on his phone as he typed rapid-fire messages, his profile illuminated by the blue glow of the screen. I studied our surroundings, trying to memorize the route in case I needed to escape again. But the driver took a series of turns that left me disoriented, and soon we were passing through an exclusive neighborhood I'd never seen before. Gated estates hidden behind high walls and lush greenery. "Where are we going?" I finally asked, my voice sounding small in the silence. Luca glanced up from his phone. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere he can't reach you." "How do you know he can't reach me there?" "You don't understand. Richard has connections. He's a detective with friends in high places. He's found me every time I've tried to." I stopped, realizing I was revealing too much to a man I'd known for less than an hour. A cold smile touched Luca's lips. "Trust me, Elena. My connections outrank his." Before I could respond, the car turned through an imposing gateway flanked by stone pillars. Security cameras swiveled to track our movement as we proceeded up a winding driveway, lined with perfectly manicured trees. At the end stood a modern mansion of glass and stone, its windows glowing warmly against the stormy night. My mouth went dry. This wasn't just wealth. This was power. The kind of power that existed in a different stratosphere from ordinary people like me. The car came to a stop beneath a covered entrance. Immediately, a man in a dark suit opened Luca's door, followed by another opening mine. They didn't look like household staff. They moved with the alert precision of trained security. Luca exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. I hesitated, suddenly aware that I was stepping further into unknown territory with each passing minute. Second thoughts, Elena? His dark eyes studied me with unsettling intensity. Yes, screamed every survival instinct I possessed. Instead, I placed my trembling hand in his and allowed him to help me from the car. His fingers closed around mine with gentle pressure, warm and startlingly steadying. The moment we entered the house, activity erupted around us. Men in suits appeared, speaking in rapid Italian. A woman materialized to take Luca's now damp suit jacket from my shoulders. I stood frozen in the massive foyer, feeling painfully out of place with my rumpled clothes and dripping hair. Luca issued a series of commands that sent everyone dispersing in different directions. Then he turned his attention back to me, his gaze traveling from my wet sneakers to my tangled hair. "You need dry clothes and rest," he stated, as though we'd somehow progressed to the stage where he could make decisions about my basic needs. "Sophia will show you to a guest room." The woman who had taken his jacket reappeared, her expression professionally blank. "This way, please." I looked between her and Luca, suddenly hesitant. "My phone?" "I'll return it once I've ensured it can't be tracked," Luca replied. "Richard won't find you here." "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question that had been burning in my mind since the train station. Why help a stranger? Something shifted in his expression. A flicker of emotion I couldn't identify before his features settled back into that unreadable mask. "Get some rest, Elena. We'll talk in the morning." It wasn't an answer, but exhaustion was beginning to cloud my judgment. I followed Sophia up a sweeping staircase to the second floor, where she led me to a guest suite larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Richard. "The bathroom is through there," she said, indicating a door. "I'll bring you something to sleep in and leave it on the bed." "Is there anything specific you need?" I shook my head, overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding me. The king-sized bed with its crisp white linens, the plush carpet beneath my feet, the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking manicured grounds. "Mr. Salvatore has requested the doctor examine you," Sophia added, her tone making it clear this wasn't optional. "Doctor, I don't need—" "For your wrist," she clarified, her eyes flickering to the bruise I'd been unconsciously covering with my other hand. "And any other injuries you may have." Shame burned hot in my cheeks. Was my abuse so obvious that even strangers could see it mapped across my body? "I'm fine." Sophia's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Mr. Salvatore insists. Dr. Chen is very discreet." Before I could protest further, she excused herself to fetch the promised sleepwear, leaving me alone in the oppressive silence of luxury. I wandered to the window, watching raindrops race down the glass as the storm continued to rage. Somewhere out there, Richard was hunting for me, likely growing more furious by the minute. What would he do when he found me? Not if, but when. Richard always found me. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass, closing my eyes against the wave of hopelessness threatening to drown me. 3 times I'd tried to leave. 3 times he'd tracked me down and dragged me back, each return marked by escalating lessons about loyalty and obedience. A soft knock pulled me from my dark thoughts. I opened the door to find a petite Asian woman with a medical bag. "Ms. Elena, I'm Dr. Chen. May I come in?" Her gentle manner put me at ease as she examined my wrist and the other injuries I'd been hiding. The fading bruises along my ribs, the half-healed cut on my shoulder from being pushed into a door handle. She worked methodically, her touch clinical, but kind, asking few questions beyond what was necessary to assess my physical condition. "You have no broken bones," she finally said, packing away her equipment. "The bruising will fade in time. I'm more concerned about your weight and signs of malnutrition." She wrote something in a small notepad. "I'm recommending a specific diet to help rebuild your strength, and supplements to address several deficiencies." I nodded numbly, too tired to argue or explain that careful control of my food had been one of Richard's favorite methods of maintaining dominance. "Doctor." Chen hesitated at the door. "Ms. Elena, if you need to speak with someone about your experiences, I can recommend several excellent therapists." "Thank you," I replied automatically. though we both knew I wouldn't be staying long enough to establish a therapeutic relationship. After she left, I showered, letting the scalding water wash away the grime of travel and fear. Sophia had left silk pajamas on the bed, obscenely expensive-looking things that felt like liquid against my skin. I slipped between sheets that probably cost more than a month's salary at my former job and expected to lie awake, analyzing escape routes and contingency plans. Instead, exhaustion claimed me instantly, dragging me into a dreamless void. I woke with a strangled gasp, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through partially opened curtains, illuminating a room I didn't recognize. For one terrifying moment, I thought Richard had found me again, had taken me to some new place to ensure I couldn't escape. Then the events of the previous night came flooding back. The train, the stranger, the rainy platform, and the choice I'd made. I sat up slowly, muscles aching from tension and days of travel. A glance at the bedside clock showed it was nearly noon. I'd slept for over 12 hours. Beside the clock sat a tray with a covered plate, a glass of juice, and a small paper cup containing what appeared to be vitamins. My stomach growled loudly, reminding me that I'd barely eaten in the past 48 hours. I removed the silver cover to find a simple but perfect omelet, fresh fruit, and whole grain toast. As I ate, I noticed a small note propped against the juice glass. Clothing in the closet. Join me in the study when you're ready. LS. The closet revealed an array of women's clothing in exactly my size. Jeans, blouses, sweaters, even underwear and bras with tags still attached. The intrusion this represented should have horrified me, but after years with Richard, I'd grown numb to such violations of privacy. At least these clothes were beautiful and practical, not the revealing outfits Richard preferred me in for easier access. I selected jeans and a soft blue sweater, comforted by their weight after months of being forced to wear dresses. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was startling. The dark circles under my eyes had faded, and my face looked less haunted after a night of uninterrupted sleep. After dressing, I ventured cautiously into the hallway, unsure where to find this study I was meant to visit. A security guard stationed at the end of the corridor straightened when he saw me. "Ms. Elena," he acknowledged with a nod. "I'll escort you to Mr. Salvatore." The house was even more impressive by daylight, a masterpiece of modern architecture with soaring ceilings, minimalist decor, and artwork that looked museum-worthy. We descended the staircase and crossed the main floor to a wing that seemed more private. The guard knocked once on a heavy wooden door, then opened it without waiting for a response. "Ms. Elena is here, sir." Luca sat behind an imposing desk, phone pressed to his ear as he spoke in rapid Italian. He gestured for me to enter, dark eyes tracking my movement as I stepped hesitantly into the room. With a few curt words, he ended his call and focused his full attention on me. "You look better," he observed, rising from his chair. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded, suddenly nervous in his presence. In daylight, Luca Salvatore was no less intimidating, perhaps even more so. His tailored shirt emphasized broad shoulders and a physique that spoke of disciplined strength. The stubble that had shadowed his jaw last night was gone, leaving his features sharper, more defined. "Thank you for the clothes," I said, wrapping my arms around my middle. "And the room. And dinner. I should go." "Go where, Elena?" He moved around the desk, leaning against its edge. "Back to your husband?" The word husband triggered an involuntary flinch. Ex-husband. Or he will be, once the divorce is finalized. Luca's expression darkened. "Does he know that?" I filed the papers 3 times. He tore them up 3 times. My voice sounded distant, detached, as though I were discussing someone else's life. The last time, he broke my wrist and told me the only way I'd leave our marriage was in a body bag. Something dangerous flashed across Luca's features before he controlled it. "And the police?" A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Richard is the police. His partners, his superiors, they all look the other way. One even told me I should be grateful to have a husband who cares enough to keep me in line." Luca went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. "I see. He moved to a sideboard and poured amber liquid into 2 crystal tumblers, offering one to me. I accepted it with trembling fingers, the scent of expensive whiskey filling my nostrils. "I had my people look into your situation," he said, swirling the liquid in his glass. "Richard Caldwell, detective with Metro PD's organized crime unit, known for excessive force complaints that mysteriously disappear. Married to Elena Margaret Caldwell, former teacher, no employment for the past 2 years." Hearing my life condensed to these clinical facts made my throat tighten. "You investigated me." Luca took a measured sip of his whiskey. "I investigate everyone who enters my life, however temporarily." "Why? Who are you that you can access police records and personal information so easily? Why would you care about a stranger on a train?" He studied me with those unfathomable dark eyes. "Let's say I have a particular dislike for men who abuse their power, especially those who wear badges while doing so." It wasn't a real answer, and we both knew it. But before I could press further, the door opened, and one of Luca's security team entered. "Sir, we have confirmation. Caldwell is actively searching. He's accessed traffic cameras and has flagged her description in the system." My blood turned to ice. Richard was using police resources to hunt me down. Again. It was exactly what I'd feared. "Has he made any progress?" Luca asked calmly. "He tracked her to the train station but lost the trail there. He's been questioning the station attendant, but the man doesn't remember anything useful." The security man's gaze flickered briefly to me. "Caldwell is becoming aggressive in his methods. He's threatened several people already." Luca nodded, as though this information merely confirmed what he already knew. "Continue monitoring. I want to know every move he makes." After the man left, Luca turned back to me. "You see your situation clearly now, Elena. You cannot simply run and hope to disappear. Not from a man with his resources and determination." The whiskey burned my throat as I took a desperate swallow. "Then what am I supposed to do? I can't go back. I won't survive it this time." "You need protection," Luca stated simply. "Someone with the power and resources to keep him away from you permanently." The implication hung heavy in the air between us. "Someone like you?" His lips curved into that not-quite smile I was beginning to recognize. "Precisely like me. Why would you do that? What could you possibly gain from involving yourself in my problems?" Luca set his glass down and moved closer, his presence overwhelming my senses. "Perhaps I simply find the idea of Richard Caldwell's fury satisfying. The man believes he owns you. Imagine his reaction when he discovers you're under my protection instead." The possessive edge in his voice raised goosebumps along my arms. "I don't want to be owned by anyone. Protection isn't ownership, Elena." He reached out, his fingers lightly tracing the fading bruise on my wrist. Though I suspect the difference is academic to a woman who's been treated as property for so long. His touch sent electricity skittering across my skin. I pulled away, needing distance to think clearly. "What exactly are you proposing? Stay here, where my security can ensure your safety. Use my resources to finalize your divorce properly, with legal representation that even a corrupt detective can't intimidate. Begin building a new life for yourself, free from fear." He paused, dark eyes intent on mine. "In exchange, I ask only for your trust." It sounded too good to be true, because it was. Nothing came without a price, especially not from powerful men. "And when you decide you want more than trust, what then?" Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, at my directness. "I'm not Richard Caldwell, Elena. I don't take what isn't freely given." Our eyes locked, the tension between us thick with unspoken possibilities. The rational part of my brain screamed warnings about jumping from one controlling relationship into another. But the desperate part, the part that had endured 3 years of escalating abuse, saw a lifeline I couldn't afford to refuse. Before I could respond, another security team member burst into the room without knocking. "Sir, we have a situation." "Caldwell is at the front gate." The words hit me like a physical blow. My legs buckled, and I sank onto the nearest chair, blood draining from my face. "That's impossible," I whispered. "How could he have found me here?" Luca remained eerily calm, moving to the large monitor on his wall with fluid grace. He pressed a button, and security camera feeds appeared, showing a police cruiser parked at the estate's main gate. Richard stood beside it in his uniform, arguing with the security guard stationed there. Even from a distance, I could see the rigid set of his shoulders, the aggressive stance I'd learned to fear. He wasn't in a rage yet, but he was working up to it. The calm before the storm I knew all too well. "He has no warrant," the security man reported. "Claims he's conducting an investigation regarding a missing person. Says he has reason to believe she's being held here against her will." A bitter laugh escaped me. The irony of Richard positioning himself as my rescuer was too cruel to bear. Luca's eyes flickered to me, then back to the screen. "Tell Paolo to inform Detective Caldwell that this is private property, and without a warrant, he has no authority to enter." Luca's voice was measured, almost bored. "If he persists, remind him that harassment of a private citizen is grounds for a formal complaint to his superiors." The security man nodded and stepped out to relay the instructions. I stared at the monitor, watching as the guard at the gate spoke into his radio. Richard's reaction was immediate and violent. His face contorted with rage as he jabbed a finger at the camera, clearly aware he was being observed. "He'll find a way in," I said hollowly. "He always does." "Not here," Luca replied with absolute certainty. "This isn't a women's shelter with minimal security or a friend's apartment he can intimidate his way into. My home is protected by measures that would challenge military forces, let alone one corrupt detective." As if to prove his point, 2 more security personnel appeared on the camera feed, taking positions behind the guard at the gate. Richard's hand moved to his service weapon, and for one terrifying moment, I thought he might actually draw it. Instead, he leaned in close to the intercom, his lips moving rapidly, though there was no audio on the feed. I could read the threat in every line of his body. "What is he saying?" Luca asked. "He's promising to destroy anyone who gets between us," I translated without hesitation, having heard similar threats countless times. "He's saying I'm mentally unstable, that I need medication and supervision, that I'm a danger to myself." My voice cracked. It's what he always says, his justification for controlling every aspect of my life. Luca's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. He pressed another button on the console. "Paolo, inform Detective Caldwell that if he doesn't remove himself from my property immediately, I will personally call the chief of police and the district attorney, both of whom dined at my table last month. Ask him if he'd like me to mention his harassment of a private citizen, or perhaps his history of domestic violence complaints that have mysteriously disappeared from the system." I watched in stunned silence as the guard relayed this message. Richard's face twisted with fury, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features. He looked directly at the camera, jabbing his finger again and mouthing words I could easily decipher. "This isn't over." Then he got into his cruiser and drove away, tires squealing on the pavement. My entire body was shaking, adrenaline flooding my system with nowhere to go. Luca crossed to a cabinet and retrieved a small pill bottle. "Dr. Chen left these for you. Mild anti-anxiety medication, if you need it." He poured a glass of water from a crystal decanter and offered both to me. "They're not strong enough to impair your judgment, just enough to take the edge off." I hesitated. Years of Richard tampering with my food and medication making me wary. Luca seemed to read my thoughts. "You don't have to take them. It was merely an offer." To my surprise, I believed him. I accepted the glass but not the pill, needing to keep my mind clear. "Thank you." He nodded, returning the pill bottle to the cabinet without comment. "He'll be back, you know. Men like Richard Caldwell don't surrender what they consider their property." "I know." The water did little to ease the dryness in my throat. "I should go. I'm putting you in danger by staying here." Luca actually laughed at that, a brief, humorless sound. "Elena, there isn't a man in this city who would dare to truly threaten me, badge or no badge." The absolute conviction in his voice raised the question I'd been avoiding since the moment he sat across from me on that train. "Who are you, really?" He studied me for a long moment, as though deciding how much truth to share. "I have business interests across several industries. Import-export, real estate, private security." It was a masterful non-answer, revealing nothing while sounding like disclosure. "That doesn't explain why a detective would back down just from hearing your name, or why you have better security than most government buildings. Doesn't it?" He moved closer, his presence filling my senses. "In this city, power comes in many forms. Some men carry badges and believe it gives them the right to abuse those weaker than themselves. Others build empires that make those badges insignificant in comparison. The implication hung between us, unspoken, but unmistakable. I'd traded the devil I knew for one I didn't, one who might be infinitely more dangerous. Yet instead of fear, I felt a strange, hollow calm. What could Luca Salvatore possibly do to me that Richard hadn't already done or threatened? At least Luca's darkness wasn't disguised beneath a badge and vows of love and protection. "You're involved in organized crime," I stated flatly, needing to hear the truth spoken aloud. His expression remained impassive. "I prefer to think of it as alternative governance. I provide services and protection to those who cannot find justice through official channels." His eyes held mine, daring me to judge him. "Like yourself. A week ago, I would have recoiled from such an admission. Now, I merely nodded, too emotionally exhausted for moral outrage. "So I've fled from a corrupt cop to a mafia boss. Is that what you're telling me?" The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. "If you prefer such simplistic terms, yes. I should have been terrified. I should have run screaming from the house. Instead, I found myself laughing, a borderline hysterical sound that held no actual humor. God, my life has become a bad movie." "On the contrary," Luca replied, moving to pour himself another drink. "In movies, the corrupt cop would face justice, and the mafia boss would be the clear villain. Reality is rarely so straightforward." He offered me a refilled glass, which I accepted this time. "What happens now?" "That depends on you." He leaned against his desk, studying me over the rim of his tumbler. "You could leave, try your luck elsewhere, hope that Richard doesn't find you again. Or you could stay here, under my protection, while we deal with your husband more. Permanently." The way he said permanently sent a chill down my spine. "I don't want him dead," I said quickly. "I just want him out of my life. There are many ways to remove a man's power without ending his life, Elena." Luca's voice was soft, almost gentle. Sometimes living with the consequences of one's actions is a far more fitting punishment than death. Before I could respond, his phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "Excuse me. I need to take this." He stepped out onto the adjacent balcony, closing the glass door behind him. Left alone, I moved to the windows overlooking the estate grounds. Security personnel patrolled the perimeter, their movements disciplined and coordinated. Beyond the high walls, the city sprawled beneath the afternoon sun, oblivious to the drama unfolding in this fortress of wealth and power. What choice did I really have? Richard would never stop hunting me. He'd made that abundantly clear from the moment I first tried to leave. Each escape attempt had only increased his determination to own me completely, to break me down until nothing remained of the woman I'd once been. Luca returned, tucking his phone into his pocket. "My team has been monitoring Caldwell's movements. He's returned to the police station, likely to try finding another approach. He won't access any useful information. I have safeguards in place." The casual way he spoke of having safeguards within the police department should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt a twisted sense of relief that someone's corruption might finally work in my favor. "I need to think," I said, setting down my barely touched drink. "This is all happening so fast." "Of course." Luca nodded, maintaining a respectful distance. "You're free to use the grounds. My security team has been instructed to ensure your privacy and safety. Take all the time you need." I wandered through the mansion's manicured gardens, trying to clear my head. The estate was even more impressive in daylight. Acres of perfectly landscaped grounds surrounded by stone walls and discreet but omnipresent security. Cameras were mounted at strategic points, their presence both reassuring and unsettling. After an hour of aimless walking, I found myself in a secluded rose garden, complete with a small stone fountain. I sat on a bench, listening to the gentle splash of water, and tried to make sense of the bizarre turn my life had taken. Just 3 days ago, I'd been planning my escape from Richard, scraping together every cent I could hide away, preparing to disappear without a trace. Now I was ensconced in a mobster's mansion, contemplating accepting his protection, with all the strings such an arrangement would inevitably entail. "You look troubled." I startled at the voice, turning to find Luca standing a few feet away. He'd changed from his formal attire into dark jeans and a simple black sweater that somehow made him look even more dangerous, less like a businessman, and more like what he truly was. "I didn't hear you approach," I said, my hand pressed against my racing heart, old habit. He didn't apologize, merely sat beside me on the bench, leaving a careful distance between us. "My security chief tells me you've walked the entire perimeter. Looking for escape routes?" Heat crept into my cheeks at being so transparent. "Force of habit," I countered, echoing his words. To my surprise, he smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his features, making him look younger, almost boyish. "Prudent. I'd be concerned if you weren't assessing your options." We sat in silence for a moment, the fountain's gentle burbling the only sound between us. Finally, I gathered my courage and asked the question that had been haunting me since I stepped into his car. "What do you want from me, Luca? Really?" He turned to face me fully, his dark eyes intent on mine. "Initially, nothing. You were a woman in trouble on a train. I offered help because I could. And now?" Something flickered in his gaze, an emotion I couldn't name. "Now I find myself invested in your situation, in ensuring Richard Caldwell never hurts you again." "Why?" I pressed. "I'm nobody to you, just a stranger with problems you don't need." Luca was quiet for so long I thought he might not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, tinged with something that sounded almost like vulnerability. "6 years ago, my sister was involved with a man who treated her as Richard treats you. We didn't know until it was too late. By the time I found out, she was in the hospital with injuries that..." He paused, a muscle ticking in his jaw. "She didn't survive them." The confession hung in the air between us, raw and unexpected. "I'm sorry," I whispered, understanding blooming like a dark flower. The man responsible was connected, a politician's son. He walked away without consequences. Luca's eyes had gone distant, focused on painful memories. That was before I had the power I have now, before I understood that justice rarely comes through official channels for people like us. "So I'm what? Your chance at redemption? A substitute for the sister you couldn't save?" The words came out harsher than I intended. His gaze snapped back to me, sharp with intensity. "No. You are yourself, Elena. Your situation reminded me of hers. But my offer of protection isn't about atonement." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "It's about preventing another tragedy at the hands of a man who believes he's above consequences." I wanted to believe him, desperately. But years with Richard had taught me that men's motivations were rarely as noble as they claimed, especially when it came to saving women. "If I accept your protection," I said carefully, "what would that mean? What would be expected of me?" "Your safety," he replied without hesitation. "That you allow my security team to do their job. That you work with the lawyers I provide to legally free yourself from your marriage. Beyond that?" He shrugged. "Nothing you don't freely choose to give." It sounded too simple, too easy. "And when it's over? When Richard is dealt with and the divorce is final, then you decide what comes next. Stay, go, rebuild your life however you wish." His eyes held mine, unwavering. "I'm offering protection, Elena, not ownership." The distinction felt important to him, perhaps because of his sister's experience, perhaps for reasons of his own. Either way, it resonated with something broken inside me, something that had been yearning for autonomy for so long. "I need guarantees," I said, surprised by my own boldness. "Written agreements about the terms of this arrangement. And I need to know exactly what you plan to do about Richard." Respect flickered across Luca's features. "Of course. I'll have my lawyers draw up whatever documents would make you feel secure. As for Richard..." His expression darkened. "I plan to use evidence of his corruption and abuse to destroy his career and reputation, to ensure he loses everything he values, just as he tried to do to you. Not violence," I insisted. "I won't have more blood on my hands." Luca's eyebrow rose slightly. "More?" The slip made my heart stutter. I hadn't told anyone, not even my sister. The last time Richard hurt me, it was bad. Worse than before. I thought he might actually kill me. My voice dropped to a whisper. "I hit him with a lamp, hard enough that I could run. He was bleeding when I left. I don't know how badly he was injured. Understanding dawned in Luca's eyes. That's why you were so frightened on the train. You thought you might have seriously hurt him. I nodded, shame burning hot in my cheeks. I've called hospitals in the area trying to see if he was admitted. He wasn't. But the guilt is crushing. Elena. Luca's voice was gentle but firm. You acted in self-defense. Whatever happened to him, he brought it upon himself. That doesn't make it right, I whispered. No, he agreed, but it makes it necessary. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, and covered my trembling hand with his. You survived. Never apologize for that. His palm was warm against my skin, the touch grounding rather than threatening. To my surprise, I didn't flinch away. I'll stay, I said finally. At least until we can be sure Richard is no longer a threat. Luca nodded, something like satisfaction flickering across his features. A wise decision. As we walked back toward the house, his hand rested lightly at the small of my back. Not controlling, but protective. It should have reminded me of Richard's possessive touches, should have triggered alarm bells and the desperate need to flee. Instead, it felt like the first step on a new and dangerous path, one that might lead to freedom, or to an entirely different kind of cage. The next few days passed in a strange bubble of luxury and tension. True to his word, Luca arranged for legal representation. A stern-faced woman named Marlene Harding, who specialized in high-profile divorces and had a reputation for ruthlessness that made even judges wary. Your husband has created quite the paper trail, she informed me during our first meeting in Luca's study. Financial records showing control of your accounts, medical records documenting accidents that align perfectly with periods when you attempted to assert independence, text messages to your family and friends that were actually sent from his phone, not yours. She looked up from her tablet, eyes sharp with professional rage. He was methodical in his isolation and control techniques. That works in our favor now. I sat perfectly still, hyper-aware of Luca's presence by the window, his back to us as he gazed out at the grounds, giving the illusion of privacy while remaining very much part of the conversation. We have enough for a restraining order, Marlene continued. Not just the standard variety. I'm filing for an emergency protective order that includes electronic monitoring. If he comes within 500 feet of you, his supervisors will be notified immediately. He is a supervisor, I pointed out quietly. His precinct captain plays poker with him every Thursday, which is why we're filing in Judge Abernathy's court, not Judge Wilson's. Abernathy has a particular dislike for officers who abuse their position. Her lips thinned into a satisfied smile. And a particular respect for Mr. Salvatore. At this, Luca turned slightly, his profile sharp against the afternoon light. Judge Abernathy values his privacy during his monthly visits to certain establishments I happen to own. Nothing improper, merely an arrangement of mutual convenience. The casual reference to what was clearly blackmail material should have disturbed me. Instead, I felt a perverse satisfaction that Richard would finally face opposition he couldn't intimidate or corrupt. What about the divorce itself? I asked, forcing myself to focus on practical matters. Marlene's expression turned predatory. We're filing under circumstances of extreme cruelty, with documented evidence. I've already submitted requests for financial discovery. Your husband has been hiding assets. A cabin in the mountains, a boat, several accounts you weren't aware of, given his pattern of abuse and financial control. We'll be seeking not just equitable division, but punitive damages. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope that I might actually escape the nightmare my marriage had become. He'll fight it, I warned. He'll claim I'm unstable, that I'm having an affair, that I stole from him. Anything to make himself the victim. Let him, Marlene replied, unperturbed. Every false claim will only strengthen our case and damage his credibility. After the lawyer left, Luca joined me on the sofa, maintaining a respectful distance that I'd come to appreciate. Unlike Richard, who'd used physical proximity as a form of control, crowding me, touching me without permission, monitoring my reactions, Luca seemed acutely aware of personal space, always giving me room to breathe. Your thoughts? He asked, dark eyes studying my expression. It feels unreal, I admitted. like I'm watching someone else's life unfold. 3 days ago, I was running with nothing but a duffel bag and dwindling cash. Now I have a high-powered attorney and evidence I didn't even know existed. You had the evidence, Luca corrected gently. What you lacked were the resources to access and utilize it effectively. Resources you just happen to have in abundance, I observed, a question lurking beneath the statement. A slight smile touched his lips. Precisely. I hesitated, then voiced the concern that had been growing since Marlene's visit. These favors, the lawyer, the judge, the evidence gathering, they come with expectations. I'm not naive enough to think otherwise. Luca considered me for a long moment. Do you know what I value above all else, Elena? The question caught me off guard. Power? Control? Loyalty? Honesty, he replied simply. In my world, a person's word is often the only true currency. Lie to me, and no amount of money or service can redeem the breach of trust. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intense. So let me be honest with you. Yes, I have expectations. I expect you to be forthright about your intentions and needs. I expect you to follow security protocols that keep both you and my people safe. I expect you to work with Marlene to free yourself legally from Richard's control. And in return, I pressed. In return, I offer protection, resources, and respect for your autonomy. His voice dropped lower. What develops beyond that baseline is entirely up to you. The implication hung in the air between us, neither acknowledged nor denied. I'd felt the tension growing over the past days. The way his eyes lingered when he thought I wasn't looking. The careful distance he maintained that somehow only emphasized the magnetic pull between us. I should get some rest, I said finally, rising from the sofa on unsteady legs. It's been a long day. Luca stood as well, ever the gentleman. Of course. Security has been doubled tonight, given the filing of the protective order. You can sleep peacefully. I'd almost reached the door when his voice stopped me. Elena. I turned, heart inexplicably racing. Whatever you might think, whatever Richard may have conditioned you to believe, you are not an obligation or a charity case to me. His eyes held mine with unsettling intensity. You are a woman of remarkable strength, who survived years of systematic abuse without losing your essential self. That is rare and worthy of admiration. The unexpected praise left me speechless, a flush spreading across my cheeks. I managed a nod before escaping to the sanctuary of my guest suite, his words echoing in my mind long after I'd closed the door. A week passed in this strange new reality. Marlene's legal machinery ground forward with terrifying efficiency, each day bringing new developments in my case against Richard. The protective order was granted, financial accounts frozen pending investigation, and preliminary divorce hearings scheduled with remarkable speed. Through it all, Richard escalated his efforts to reach me. He left raging voicemails on my new secure phone, alternating between threats and tearful pleas for reconciliation. The same cycle of abuse and love bombing I'd endured for years. He sent flowers to every hospital in the city, knowing I'd once worked as a teacher's aide in a children's ward. He even tried to enlist my estranged mother, who predictably took his side and called to berate me for throwing away a good man over a few arguments. Each attempt was documented by Luca's security team and added to the growing legal case against him. His behavior became increasingly erratic as his control slipped away, exactly as I'd feared, and exactly as Luca had predicted. Men like Richard define themselves through power over others, Luca observed one evening as we shared dinner in the estate's smaller, more intimate dining room. When that power is threatened, they become dangerous, but also careless. Each public outburst, each documented threat strengthens our position. I pushed the excellent sea base around my plate, appetite diminished by the day's events. Richard had been placed on administrative leave pending investigation into his conduct, a development that would only fuel his rage. I'm worried about what he'll do when he reaches the breaking point, I admitted. He has nothing to lose now. Luca studied me across the table, candlelight casting shadows across his angular features. Over the past week, I'd begun to read his expressions better. The slight tightening around his eyes that indicated concern, the almost imperceptible softening of his mouth when something pleased him. That's why you haven't left the estate since arriving. he noted. Not because you feel imprisoned here, but because you fear what awaits outside these walls. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Though Luca had made it clear I was free to come and go as I pleased, with security escorts for my protection, I'd chosen to remain within the safety of the compound. Is it that obvious? I asked, setting down my fork. To me, yes. A hint of that rare smile touched his lips. I've become something of an expert in your expressions, Elena. The admission sent a wave of warmth through me that had nothing to do with the excellent wine. Over these days of shared meals and careful conversations, something had shifted between us. The initial wariness had given way to a tentative trust, and beneath that, a current of attraction neither of us acknowledged openly. Tomorrow, Luca said, changing the subject. Marlene will need you to review your statement before the hearing. After that, I thought you might like to visit the City Gallery's new exhibition. One of the artists featured is a personal friend. I nearly dropped my wine glass. Leave the estate? Is that safe? With proper precautions, yes. His expression remained calm, but I detected a hint of determination beneath. Richard cannot control your movements indefinitely, Elena. Confining yourself here only gives him another form of power over you. He was right, of course. In running from Richard, I'd created another kind of prison for myself, safer and more luxurious, but a cage nonetheless. All right, I agreed, surprising myself with the decision. I'd like that. The genuine pleasure that crossed Luca's face was worth the spike of anxiety the prospect of leaving caused. It occurred to me then how little he asked for himself, how each suggestion or directive had been focused on my well-being or legal situation. What about you? I asked impulsively. You've put your life on hold to deal with my problems. Surely there are business matters requiring your attention. Something unreadable flickered in his dark eyes. My organization runs smoothly whether I'm directly involved or not. That's the benefit of having competent people in key positions. Still, I persisted. There must be something you're missing or delaying because of me. Luca took a measured sip of wine before answering. I was scheduled to attend my goddaughter's birthday celebration in Milan next week. Nothing that can't be rescheduled. The casual mention of family, of normal social obligations beyond the world of power, plays and legal battles, humanized him in a way nothing else had. I tried to picture Luca Salvatore, dangerous mafia boss, attending a child's birthday party, and found the image both incongruous and oddly endearing. You shouldn't miss it, I said firmly. Not because of me. The situation with Richard remains volatile, he countered. I wouldn't leave you unprotected. You have an entire security team, I reminded him, and I'm getting better at following protocols. I leaned forward, suddenly determined to give him something in return for all he'd done. Go to Milan. Celebrate your goddaughter's birthday. I'll be fine for a few days. Luca studied me with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see through pretense. You're certain? Yes, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Your life shouldn't stop because of my problems. Something shifted in his expression, a softening that transformed his features. You continue to surprise me, Elena. Is that a good thing? I asked, only half joking. Very good, he murmured, his voice dropping to a register that sent warmth curling through my stomach. Few people in my life ever surprise me anymore. The moment stretched between us, charged with unspoken possibilities. Then his phone vibrated, breaking the spell. He glanced at the screen, his expression instantly reverting to the controlled mask I'd come to recognize as his business face. Excuse me, he said, rising smoothly from his chair. I need to take this. I nodded, watching him step into the adjacent room, his voice dropping to a low murmur as he answered the call. Even in this private moment, he maintained a careful distance, ensuring I couldn't overhear his conversation, protecting me, I realized, from knowledge that might compromise me. In the week I'd spent under Luca's protection, I'd seen glimpses of his other life, cryptic phone calls, meetings with men who carried themselves with the same deadly grace, brief conversations that ended abruptly when I entered a room. He kept that world carefully partitioned from mine, never bringing his business into the spaces we shared. It was considerate in a way Richard had never been, with his tendency to bring work home, to discuss suspects and criminals over dinner, to leave case files spread across our dining table. Richard had used his work to intimidate me, to remind me of the power he wielded. Luca did the opposite, segregating the darker aspects of his life to create a space where I could feel safe. He returned a few minutes later, his expression neutral once more. My apologies for the interruption. Is everything all right? I asked, more out of politeness than expectation of a real answer. To my surprise, he responded with unusual candor. A business associate is having trouble with local authorities. Nothing serious, but it requires attention. The kind of attention that would be better discussed in person, I suggested. In Milan, perhaps, while you're there for your goddaughter's party. Luca's eyebrow rose slightly. You're very perceptive. I shrugged, attempting nonchalance. I was married to a detective. I learned to read between lines, a skill that serves you well. He resumed his seat, studying me with renewed interest. You're suggesting I combine the personal visit with business matters. Why not? It seems efficient. I took a sip of wine, feeling oddly pleased with myself, and it would give you a valid reason to go, beyond just my encouragement. A genuine smile spread across his face, a rare, unguarded expression that transformed him from intimidating crime lord to startlingly handsome man. Efficiency and practicality, qualities I greatly admire. The approval in his voice warmed me more than it should have. I'd spent years being criticized by Richard for these exact traits. My organized approach to problems, my practical solutions derided as cold and unfeeling. Then it settled, I said, with more confidence than I felt. You'll go to Milan, I'll stay here with your security team, and we'll both pretend not to worry about each other while you're gone. The last part slipped out before I could censor it, revealing more than I'd intended. Luca's eyes darkened, his expression turning serious. Would you worry about me, Elena? The question hung between us, weighted with implications. A week ago, I would have deflected or lied. Now I found myself answering honestly. Yes, I admitted softly. I would. The art gallery was housed in a renovated industrial space, all exposed brick and soaring ceilings. I moved through the exhibition slowly, Luca a constant presence at my side, his security team maintaining a discreet perimeter around us. Despite the armed escort and the knowledge that Richard was still somewhere in the city, I felt a heady sense of freedom, being outside the estate walls for the first time in over a week. What do you think? Luca asked, indicating a massive canvas dominated by swirls of crimson and black. I studied the piece, trying to articulate the emotions it evoked. It's turbulent, like looking into someone's rage made visible. I glanced at him. Is this your friend's work? Yes. Marco tends toward the dramatic in his art, much like in his life. A hint of affection colored Luca's voice. He claims this series was inspired by Greek mythology, the punishment of Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to humanity, I recalled. Zeus chained him to a rock where an eagle ate his liver every day, only for it to regenerate each night, so the torture could continue eternally. Luca looked impressed. You know your mythology. I was going to be an English teacher before. I trailed off, the memory of abandoned dreams still raw. Literature was my passion, mythology, classics, poetry. All of it. Was? He questioned gently. I shrugged, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. Life happened. Dreams changed, or were changed for you, Luca observed with quiet insight. He guided me toward the next piece, his hand hovering near the small of my back without quite touching, always respectful of boundaries. What would you do now, if all obstacles were removed? If Richard were no longer a concern, and you could choose any path? The question caught me off guard. I'd been focused on survival for so long that the luxury of dreams seemed foreign, almost frivolous. I don't know, I admitted. Teaching, maybe, or writing. I used to write before Richard decided it was a waste of time. Luca's expression darkened momentarily. Men like Richard fear anything that nurtures independence in those they seek to control. We moved through the gallery in companionable silence, pausing occasionally when a piece caught my interest. It felt surreally normal, like a date rather than an outing with armed guards strategically positioned throughout the venue. The thought brought a flush to my cheeks. Was that what this was? A date? The idea seemed absurd given our circumstances, yet I couldn't deny the chemistry that had been building between us over the past days. "You're blushing," Luca observed, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Just warm," I lied, avoiding his knowing gaze. His lips curved in that not-quite smile I'd come to anticipate. "Of course." As we approached the gallery's cafe area, a flash of movement caught my eye, a figure ducking behind a pillar, the familiar set of shoulders sending ice through my veins. Richard. My body froze instinctively, terror locking my muscles. Luca noticed immediately, his hand closing gently around my elbow. "What is it?" he asked, voice calm but alert. "Richard," I whispered, eyes fixed on the spot where I'd glimpsed him. By the pillar near the exit. Luca didn't turn to look, didn't react visibly at all. Instead, he smoothly guided me toward a quieter alcove while making a subtle gesture to his security team. "Are you certain?" "Yes," I breathed, heart hammering against my ribs. "He shouldn't be here. The protective order." "Breathe, Elena," Luca instructed, positioning himself to shield me from view. "My men will handle this. You're safe." I watched over his shoulder as two of his security team converged on the area where I'd seen Richard. A moment later, one of them touched his earpiece and shook his head in Luca's direction. "He's gone," Luca translated, though his posture remained tense. "They're checking the exits and security footage." "He was here," I insisted, fighting the familiar sensation of being disbelieved that Richard had cultivated for years. "I know what I saw." "I believe you," Luca said immediately, his dark eyes steady on mine. "That's why we're leaving. Now." He ushered me toward a service entrance, his security team forming a protective formation around us. Within minutes, we were in his armored car, pulling away from the gallery. "How did he know we'd be there?" I asked, hands trembling despite my efforts to remain calm. "The exhibition wasn't publicly announced. We didn't tell anyone we were going." Luca's expression was thunderous. "A question I intend to answer very thoroughly." He pressed a button on his phone. "Paolo, lockdown communications. I want every employee interviewed, every system checked for breaches. No one leaves until we have answers." I stared out the window as the city blurred past, the brief taste of freedom soured by fear. "He'll never stop," I whispered, more to myself than to Luca. "Not until he has me back, or I'm dead." Luca's hand covered mine, warm and steadying. "Neither of those outcomes will happen, Elena. I promise you that." The fierce conviction in his voice pierced through my panic, grounding me in the present moment. I turned my hand beneath his, our fingers interlacing naturally. "I'm sorry," he said after a moment. I underestimated his obsession. "It won't happen again." The apology startled me. Richard had never once admitted fault or expressed genuine remorse in our entire relationship. "It's not your fault. Security is my responsibility," Luca countered. "Your safety is my priority." I studied our joined hands, struck by the contrast, his tanned skin against my paler tone, his strength contained and offered as support, rather than used to control. "Why?" I asked softly. "Why am I your priority? The truth, Luca. Not the convenient explanation about your sister or justice." His dark eyes met mine, something vulnerable flickering in their depths. "Because from the moment I saw you on that train, exhausted, terrified, but still fighting, I felt something I haven't experienced in a very long time." "What?" I whispered. "Recognition," he answered simply. "I recognized something in you that resonated with me. A survivor's spirit, a refusal to be broken, despite everything that's been done to you." His thumb traced gentle patterns against my palm. "It's rare, and immeasurably valuable." The admission hung between us, more intimate than any declaration of attraction could have been. I'd expected many things from Luca Salvatore. Protection, perhaps desire, maybe even affection, but not this profound understanding that pierced straight to my core. "I see you too," I confessed, voice barely audible above the car's engine. Not just the power or the danger, but the man beneath it all. I squeezed his hand gently. The man who respects boundaries, who keeps his word, who separates his darkness from those he protects. Something shifted in Luca's expression. A guard lowering, revealing a glimpse of naked emotion before he carefully composed himself again. "We should focus on your safety now. Emotions can wait." But they couldn't. Not really. Not when Richard's appearance had shattered the illusion of security and reminded me how fragile life could be. Not when every moment felt borrowed, existing in the space between one crisis and the next. Back at the estate, Luca insisted on a full security sweep before allowing me inside. His team moved with military precision, checking every room, every potential entry point. I waited in the car, watching his commanding presence as he directed the operation, struck by the contrast between his controlled power and Richard's explosive rage. One was a storm that destroyed indiscriminately, the other, a force of nature channeled with precision. When we finally entered the house, Luca led me directly to his study, closing the door behind us. "I've arranged for Marlene to file an emergency violation report," he said, moving to the sideboard to pour us both a drink. "With evidence from the gallery's security cameras, Richard will face consequences for breaching the protective order." I accepted the glass he offered, needing the burn of alcohol to steady my nerves. "He's a cop, Luca. He's been evading consequences his entire career. Not anymore." Luca's voice hardened, not with me involved. The determination in his expression should have frightened me. This was a man accustomed to solving problems through means the law didn't sanction. Instead, I felt a complicated mixture of gratitude and something deeper, more dangerous. "You're still planning to go to Milan," I stated, noticing the travel documents on his desk. Luca hesitated. "Under the circumstances, perhaps it would be better to—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "You should go. Your goddaughter is expecting you." "Elena?" "I'll be fine," I insisted. "Your security team is more than capable. And after today, I'm perfectly content to stay within the estate until you return." I managed a weak smile. "Besides, Richard's violated the order now. He'll be dealing with the fallout for at least a few days." Luca studied me, clearly conflicted. 3 days, he finally said. "I'll be gone for exactly 3 days, with the jet ready to return immediately if needed." I nodded, relieved he wasn't canceling his plans because of me. 3 days is nothing. I've survived much worse for much longer. His expression softened, something like admiration flickering in his dark eyes. "Your resilience continues to astonish me." The compliment warmed me in ways I wasn't ready to examine too closely. I finished my drink, setting the glass down carefully. "I should rest. It's been an eventful day." Luca nodded, but made no move to open the door. "Elena?" he began, then paused, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. "When I return from Milan, perhaps we should discuss the nature of our arrangement." My heartbeat quickened. "What about it?" "It's evolving beyond its original parameters," he said carefully. "I think we both feel it. The acknowledgement of the tension between us, the growing attraction neither of us had voiced, hung in the air like an electric charge. I should have been cautious, should have remembered all the ways Richard had used my emotions against me. Instead, I found myself stepping closer to Luca, drawn by something more powerful than fear. "Yes," I agreed softly. "It is." His eyes darkened, desire written plainly across his features. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movement, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I remained still, he cupped my cheek with a gentleness that made my heart ache. "I want to kiss you," he murmured, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers down my spine. "But only if you're certain." 3 weeks ago, I'd been a prisoner in my own home, my body and will subject to another man's control. The fact that Luca would ask permission for something as simple as a kiss, that he would prioritize my autonomy over his desire, was more seductive than any grand gesture could have been. I answered by rising onto my tiptoes, closing the distance between us myself. The first brush of his lips against mine was gentle, questioning. When I responded, leaning into him, his arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer as the kiss deepened. Unlike Richard's demanding, possessive kisses that had always felt like another form of control, Luca's touch was patient, exploratory, less about taking and more about discovering. I melted against him, my hands sliding up to his shoulders, reveling in the solid strength of him. When we finally parted, both slightly breathless. Luca rested his forehead against mine. "That," he said softly, "was worth waiting for." A small laugh escaped me, part nervousness, part genuine joy. "Yes," I agreed, "it was." He brushed a strand of hair from my face, his touch reverent. "We should stop here for tonight. There's no rush, Elena. When I return from Milan, we'll have time to explore this properly." The restraint in his voice, the careful consideration for my emotional state after the day's turmoil, only increased my growing feelings for him. This man, who commanded an empire in the shadows, who could take whatever he wanted by force or threat, was choosing to move at my pace, to prioritize my comfort over his desires. 3 days, I reminded him, reluctantly stepping back. Not a day longer. His smile was slow and full of promise. Not a minute longer than necessary. The first day without Luca passed in a strange bubble of luxury and tension. I spent most of it in the library, losing myself in books I hadn't had the luxury of reading during my marriage. Richard had monitored my reading material, claiming certain novels gave me ideas that made me difficult. In Luca's extensive collection, I found treasures I'd been denied for years: feminist literature, poetry, classics I'd studied in college and then been forced to abandon. The second day brought news from Marlene. Richard had indeed been served with notice of his violation, had been suspended without pay pending investigation. His captain, finally facing pressure from the commissioner after media attention on the case, had placed him on mandatory psychiatric evaluation. "It's falling apart for him," Marlene informed me during our video call. "His colleagues are distancing themselves. His union representative is suggesting he take a plea deal on the abuse charges. He's isolated now, Elena. Just like he isolated you. The poetic justice should have brought satisfaction. Instead, it filled me with a creeping dread. Richard was never more dangerous than when cornered. I shared my concerns with Paolo, Luca's head of security, who immediately doubled the patrols around the property and stationed additional men at key access points. Mr. Salvatore would expect nothing less, he assured me when I apologized for the extra precautions. Your safety is his highest priority. That night, Luca called from Milan, his deep voice sending warmth through me even across the distance. "Everything all right?" "Fine," I answered, curled up in bed with the phone pressed to my ear. "Quiet. Almost too quiet after everything." "You're worried," he observed, reading me even through the phone. I sighed. Richard's being backed into a corner. That's when he's most unpredictable. "My team is aware and prepared," Luca assured me. "But I'll be home tomorrow regardless." "The celebration ends tonight. How was it?" I asked, eager to change the subject. "The birthday party?" His chuckle warmed me from within. Chaotic. 12 6-year-olds hopped up on cake and excitement. My goddaughter made me wear a tiara for most of the afternoon. The image of Luca Salvatore, fearsome mafia boss, wearing a child's tiara made me laugh out loud. "Please tell me someone took pictures." "Several, unfortunately," he replied, mock resignation in his voice. "All of which will be destroyed as soon as I return." We talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing easily between us. When we finally said goodnight, I found myself missing his physical presence with an intensity that surprised me. The third day dawned gray and rainy, matching my restless mood. Despite reassurances from Paolo and the visible security presence, anxiety gnawed at my insides. I tried to lose myself in books again, but found my attention wandering, my gaze constantly drawn to the windows and the storm beyond. By evening, the rain had become torrential, lightning splitting the sky at irregular intervals. I sat in the living room, a novel open but unread in my lap, watching the clock and calculating when Luca's plane would land. He'd texted earlier. They'd been delayed by the weather but were cleared for takeoff. 2 more hours, perhaps 3. And he'd be home. Home. The words slipped into my thoughts, unbidden. When had Luca's mansion begun to feel like home? When had his presence become something I craved rather than merely tolerated or appreciated? A crash of thunder shook the windows, startling me from my reverie. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. I set my book aside and moved to the window, watching sheets of rain lash against the glass. The security patrol passed below, guard dogs straining at their leashes despite the downpour. I watched them make their rounds, grateful for their vigilance yet unsettled by its necessity. Another flash of lightning illuminated the grounds, and for a split second, I thought I saw a figure moving near the eastern perimeter wall. I blinked, straining to see through the curtain of rain. But there was nothing. Just shadows and storm-tossed trees. My imagination was getting the better of me, fueled by days of tension and anticipation. I turned away from the window, determined to find something to occupy my mind until Luca returned. The lights went out. For a moment, I stood frozen in the sudden darkness, heart pounding against my ribs. Then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing the room in a dim, bluish glow. Standard procedure during storms, Paolo had explained during my security briefing. Nothing to worry about, except the house phone wasn't working when I tried it, nor was my cell phone receiving any signal. A cold certainty settled in my stomach. This wasn't just a power outage. Someone had cut the lines deliberately. Richard had found a way in. The realization galvanized me into action. I moved quickly to Luca's study, where I knew he kept a secure satellite phone for emergencies. The hallways felt endless, each shadow potentially concealing my hunter. I'd almost reached the study when I heard it. The soft scrape of a window being forced open somewhere nearby. Abandoning stealth for speed, I ran the remaining distance, shutting and locking the heavy door behind me. The satellite phone sat on Luca's desk, a lifeline in the growing nightmare. I lunged for it, fingers trembling as I dialed the emergency number Paolo had made me memorize. "Security office," a clipped voice answered on the first ring. "It's Elena," I whispered, eyes fixed on the door. "Richard's in the house, east wing, near the living room. Power and communications are compromised. Stay where you are, Ms. Elena. Secure the room. Team is mobilizing now." I hung up and moved quickly around the study, checking windows and the connecting bathroom, all secure. I retrieved the small pistol Luca had shown me on my second day. Loaded but safety on, hidden in a concealed drawer of his desk. Then I waited, gun clutched in trembling hands, ears straining for any sound beyond the rain and thunder. Minutes stretched like hours. Where was security? The estate was large, but not so vast that response should take this long. Something had gone very wrong. A soft click at the door made me raise the gun, finger hovering near the trigger as Luca had taught me. The handle turned slowly, testing the lock. "Elena." Richard's voice, deceptively gentle, drifted through the wood. "I know you're in there, sweetheart. Open the door so we can talk." I remained silent, backing toward Luca's private bathroom where there was a second exit, a fact Richard couldn't know. "I'm not angry anymore," he continued, his tone taking on that reasonable quality that had always preceded his worst violence. "I understand why you ran. You were confused, manipulated. But I'm here now. I can take you home. Home." Once that word from his lips had meant safety. Now it represented only pain and control and slow suffocation. "The police are coming," I called, hoping to deter him. "Luca's security team is already on their way." A chilling laugh answered me. "No, they're not. Your boyfriend's precious security team is currently occupied with a situation at the main gate. Amazing what you can accomplish with a stolen maintenance truck and a little inside information." Inside information. The realization struck like a physical blow. Someone within Luca's organization had betrayed us. That's how Richard had known about the gallery. How he'd managed to bypass the estate's formidable defenses. And as for Salvatore himself, Richard continued, a vicious satisfaction in his voice. "Terrible weather for flying tonight. So many things can go wrong when a private jet encounters unexpected turbulence." Cold horror washed through me. "What did you do?" "Insurance, sweetheart. Just making sure we have time to ourselves." The door handle rattled more violently. "Now open this fucking door before I break it down." I moved swiftly to the bathroom, closing and locking that door as well before slipping through the second exit into Luca's private quarters. My mind raced, calculating options, escape routes, weapons. Richard knew the main security team was diverted, but he couldn't know about the secondary team Luca had mentioned, the ones who remained inside the house at all times. Unless the betrayal went deeper than we'd realized. The sound of splintering wood echoed from the study, Richard breaking through the main door. I had minutes, perhaps less. I moved through Luca's bedroom toward the hidden panic room he'd shown me during my security orientation. 3 steps across the closet, panel behind the suits, fingerprint scanner disguised as a thermostat control. I pressed my thumb to the scanner, praying Luca had added my prints as promised. A soft beep, a click, and the panel slid open, revealing a small, fortified room beyond. I slipped inside, just as I heard Richard entering Luca's bedroom. His heavy footsteps unmistakable after years of learning to identify his approach. The panel closed silently behind me, sealing me in darkness for a moment before soft lighting activated automatically. A bank of security monitors showed views from throughout the house. On one, I could see Richard methodically searching Luca's quarters, gun in hand, face twisted with rage. Another showed the main gate, where a burning truck had created the diversion he'd mentioned. A third displayed the security team regrouping, realizing they'd been tricked, but the image that stopped my heart was on the central monitor. Luca's car pulling through a service entrance, him emerging with 2 security men, face set in lines of cold fury as he assessed the situation. He'd come back early. He was here. Relief warred with terror as I watched him receive a briefing from Paolo, his expression darkening with each word. He issued rapid commands, his team immediately dispersing to predetermined positions. Then he drew his own weapon and moved purposefully toward the east wing, toward Richard, toward me. I fumbled with the panic room's communication system, finally locating the direct line to the security team. "Paolo, it's Elena. I'm in the panic room." Richard is armed and in Luca's quarters. Luca is heading straight for him. "Understood, Ms. Elena. Stay where you are. We have the situation under control." But the situation was anything but controlled. On the monitors, I watched as Richard, alerted by some sound, took up a position of ambush near the bedroom door. Luca was approaching from the hallway, unaware that Richard was lying in wait just inside. I couldn't let it happen. Couldn't watch Richard destroy the one good thing I'd found amid the wreckage of my life. Against all security protocols, I unlocked the panic room and slipped back into the bedroom, gun clutched tightly in my hand. Richard had moved to the connecting bathroom, giving me a narrow window to reach the hallway and warn Luca. I'd made it halfway across the room when Richard emerged, his expression shifting from predatory anticipation to shock at finding me there. "Elena," he breathed, a terrible smile spreading across his face. "There you are." I raised the gun, aiming directly at his chest as Luca had taught me. "Stay back, Richard. It's over." He laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "It's never over between us, sweetheart. Till death do us part, remember." He took a step forward, utterly unconcerned by the weapon in my hands. "You won't shoot me? You don't have it in you. Don't test me," I warned, voice steadier than I felt. "I'm not the same woman you terrorized for years." "No," he agreed, his gaze hardening. "You're worse. A whore who ran from her husband into the arms of a criminal." Another step closer. "Did you fuck him yet, Elena? Did you spread your legs for Salvatore while my ring was still on your finger?" His words were designed to provoke shame, to trigger the conditioning he'd spent years instilling. Once, they would have worked, would have made me doubt myself, question my worth and agency. Now they only strengthened my resolve. The bedroom door crashed open behind me, and Luca's voice rang out, cold and deadly. "She belongs to no one but herself." Richard's gaze shifted to Luca, hatred blazing in his eyes. "The big shot himself. Come to save your whore?" "No," Luca replied calmly, moving to stand beside me rather than in front of me, treating me as an equal, not a possession to be protected. "Elena doesn't need saving. She's perfectly capable of handling this herself." His dark eyes flicked to me briefly. "Though I'm happy to assist if she wishes." The respect in his voice, the acknowledgement of my agency even in this life or death moment, filled me with a calm certainty I'd never experienced before. "It's over, Richard," I stated, my aim unwavering. "You've lost. Your career, your reputation, your power, all gone. And you never had me, not really. You only had my fear. And now you don't even have that," Luca added, his own weapon trained on Richard with deadly precision. Richard's eyes darted between us, the reality of his situation finally penetrating his rage. Security personnel were visible in the hallway behind Luca. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. For a moment I thought he might surrender, might finally accept the inevitable. Then his face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "If I can't have you," he snarled, finger tightening on the trigger, "no one will." 3 shots rang out in rapid succession. Richard crumpled to the floor, blood blooming across his chest from the bullets Luca and I had fired simultaneously. His eyes, wide with shock, fixed on me as the life drained from them. "You did have it in you after all," he whispered, blood bubbling at his lips. Then he was gone. The monster who had haunted my existence finally, irrevocably silenced. I lowered the gun slowly, a strange numbness washing over me. Luca gently took the weapon from my hands, securing both firearms before turning to me. "Elena," he said softly, his hands hovering near my shoulders without touching, still respecting boundaries even in this moment of crisis. "Are you all right?" I nodded, unable to form words as the reality of what had just happened settled over me. Richard was dead. By my hand and Luca's, the nightmare was truly over. "It was self-defense," Luca stated, his voice pitched for the security team now entering the room. "Multiple witnesses saw him aim first. The gun is his service weapon, discharged by him when he broke into my home and threatened us. Is that clear?" Murmurs of agreement rippled through his men, as they secured the scene with practiced efficiency. Luca finally touched me, his hand warm against my cheek. "Let's get you somewhere quiet," he suggested gently. "The police will need statements, but that can wait a few minutes." I allowed him to guide me from the room, away from Richard's body and the blood staining Luca's expensive carpet. We ended up in a small sitting room I'd never seen before, tucked away in a quiet corner of the house. "You came back early," I said numbly, the first words I'd spoken since the shooting. "I felt uneasy," Luca admitted, pouring me a glass of water. "Something didn't feel right. I've learned to trust those instincts." I accepted the water gratefully, my throat parched from fear and adrenaline. "He said someone gave him information. Someone inside your organization." Luca's expression darkened. "I know. The breach has been identified and addressed." I didn't ask what addressed meant. Some questions were better left unasked in Luca's world. "Richard said something about your plane," I continued, the fear I'd felt at his threat still fresh. "He implied he'd arranged some kind of sabotage." "An empty threat," Luca assured me. "My planes are checked thoroughly before every flight by my own security team. Even if someone had attempted something, it would have been discovered." Relief washed through me, followed quickly by the delayed shock of everything that had happened. I began to tremble uncontrollably, the glass slipping from my fingers. Luca caught it smoothly before it could shatter, setting it aside before taking my ice-cold hands in his. "It's over, Elena," he said softly, his dark eyes holding mine. "Truly over. He can never hurt you again." A sob tore from my throat as 3 years of terror and suppressed emotion finally broke free. Luca gathered me against his chest, his arms strong and secure around me as I wept. For the woman I'd been before Richard, for the years lost to fear, for the future I could now claim without looking over my shoulder. "I killed him," I whispered against Luca's shirt. "I actually pulled the trigger. To save your life," Luca reminded me gently. "And perhaps mine as well. There is no guilt in that, Elena, only justice." I pulled back slightly to look up at him, finding no judgment in his gaze, only understanding and something deeper, warmer. "What happens now?" "Now," Luca said, brushing tears from my cheek with his thumb, "you begin the life you were meant to have. Free from fear, free from control. Whatever that life looks like, whatever you wish it to be." "And you?" I asked, heart beating faster. "Where do you fit in that life?" A rare, genuine smile touched his lips. "Wherever you want me, Elena. For as long as you want me." It wasn't a declaration of love. We weren't there yet, might not be for some time. It was something equally precious, a promise of choice, of agency, of mutual respect between equals, despite the power imbalance that would always exist between us. "I want you beside me," I said softly, with more certainty than I'd felt about anything in years. Not as my protector or savior, but as my partner. Someone who sees me as I am and values me for it. Luca's eyes darkened with emotion as he drew me closer. That, he murmured against my lips, is exactly where I want to be. Our kiss held the promise of a future neither of us had dared imagine. One built not on fear or control, but on mutual strength and hard-won freedom. The road ahead would not be simple. Luca's world would always contain dangers, and my healing would take time and work. But for the first time since I'd fled my prison of a marriage and boarded that fateful train, I felt something long forgotten stirring within me. Hope.